is correct. Do I look like Hagrid? Acceptable. Hey legends, this is I Am Manifestation. I'm your conscious manifestation coach, Cerise, and I help you get out of your own way so you can manifest your version of an awesome fucking life. In this video, I wanted to give you guys a few things that I kind of learned the hard way, implemented in 2023. So things that I learned the hard way or discovered or implemented in 2023 that really changed the conscious manifestation game for me. Some of these are going to be pretty familiar, but that's what changed the game for me. Like, I was teaching you guys as I was learning. So it's not going to be a surprise to a lot of you that the first one was my cheat codes that I integrated into my practice. The weird thing about those is, to some degree, even though I was watching a lot of normal, like very thought-heavy law of assumption resources when I first learned about conscious manifestation, and still at the time that I created my freebie, which is in the description below, but I put in my Simple as Fuck Conscious Manifestation Guide ebook, which is the 22-page freebie in the description, that, one of the things on there was live your life. Live your life is feel good things, guys. It's not sitting at home like pining over and waiting for the thing, personal situation you want to show up. Can it still show up? Yes, it can, but you're going to be focusing so much more on things that make it hard for you to stay on top of your thoughts when you're not living your life, when you're not doing feel good things. And I put that in the ebook, but I wasn't really doing it outside of like one thing, which was playing touch. And one of the things that was throwing me off my thoughts was also involved in touch. So when I left touch and that was like my hobby, my thing that I loved doing, I was like, I felt a bit lost. I was like, fuck, what else do I have? And I think a lot of us find ourselves in those situations, whether it's a hobby that we end up stepping away from for whatever reason. It could be injury, it could be because it doesn't feel good anymore because the people in that situation, some of them could be toxic, and it just takes the enjoyment out of that hobby or event or whatever it is that you were doing. It could be that when a relationship ends, you don't have an identity anymore because your identity became all the things that that person does, you did, and you gave up all the shit that you used to do and enjoy and love before you got into that relationship because you narrowed your focus solely onto them. So it could be a lot of different scenarios, but this is why it's so important to do your feel good things, to live your life whilst you're, which I was going to say, whilst you're moving into the reality, shifting, moment to moment into the reality where your manifestation exists, but also because when you get your manifestation, you don't want to then, you focus solely on your manifestation. Then when you get your manifestation, that's all that you have. And then you put all the pressure on your manifestation to keep making you happy because you don't have anything else in your life that makes you happy, that you derive joy from. And that's why living your life, having feel good things, which is one of my cheat codes, is so, so fucking important. The other thing that I mentioned in that, it's either in that or it's other things that I had posted about before I kind of expanded on the idea. And that was when you are creating your affirmations, for example, because remember, I was very much listening to the thought heavy law of assumption teachers before I realized, like, even though I teach law of assumption, it doesn't mean that I can't teach other things that make law of assumption easier. And that's when I sort of like integrated in on my platform things that I had integrated in my personal practice in my life that had made the process easier, and was like, I can still call myself a law of assumption coach. You know what I mean? And that was, I was talking a lot about when you're creating your affirmations, not just using the affirmations that other people suggest or say, particularly if they're like not in your way of speaking or they don't feel good for you to say, reword them. Find something that feels better to say. And then, as I got further along in my journey, I started to understand law of attraction, which used to sound like gibberish to me, until I understood conscious manifestation from the perspective of the law of assumption. And then I was able to go back to videos on like Abraham Hicks videos, Bashar videos, and things like that, that are law of attraction teachers, and realize that it's all the same shit. They're just different manuals for the same thing, conscious manifestation. And something that they both talk about, but I'll use the terminology that Abraham Hicks uses is find a better feeling thought. So I started to understand the importance of feelings and trusting your feelings, and also knowing that your feelings can betray you a little bit when you are coming at it from an out of whack nervous system. So that is really where that, and kind of hitting the pitfalls that I did by following just the thought heavy law of assumption teachings, and getting burnt out, getting unwell, having skin issues, and it was all sorts of things. I got burnt out, so I was extremely fatigued. I continued playing touch through that fatigue, which made it worse. I had skin issues that started as a few spots on my face and turned into these rashes of like pussy, like clusters of whiteheads on my face. And at one point, my whole face was covered in pimples and this rash. I had like a red rash around my neck. I started reacting. I remember sitting on the grass one day after touch and with shorts on, and I welted up in like this kind of hives rash on the back of my thighs, and was like hot and burning and itchy. My lips blew up. I think I've talked about that, like that episode of Keeping Up the Kardashians where Kris Jenner's lips doubled in size when they were on holiday. It was kind of like that. It was a bit of a shock to the system. So all of these things are happening. I was having reactions to things that I normally didn't have an issue with. It wasn't until then that the anxiety, right? It was like being a frog in boiling water. A frog in a pot of, I don't know what the analogy is, but it's essentially, I'm butchering it, but it's about like a frog being in a pot of water and then like just slowly heating up the water until it boils. And the frog doesn't realize, like, it's such a gradual process that the frog doesn't realize that it's actually being cooked because the temperature rises so gradually. And that's kind of what it was like in this situation. Like initially, the first couple of instances, I was able to be like, whatever, doesn't matter, doesn't affect things. And in the isolated incidences, some of the things didn't seem like that big of a deal, but it was over a long period of time where it was constant that my anxiety gradually got more and more out of control until my nervous system was shot because I had been in this survival mode for so long. And then on top of that, like that must not be named, that was affecting the whole world on top of everything. Like there was a bunch of other things going on as well. And it wasn't until I completely like crashed that I had to step away from this thing that had actually led to me feeling that way and getting to that point. When you crash from anxiety, prolonged anxiety, the tendency is that you get to a very low state. And I don't like to throw the D word around because I was only in that state for a few months before I kind of realized I need outside help, and it's okay to ask for help. That's something that I have struggled with in the past, hyper independence. Just keep repeating the old cycle, getting burnt out and then isolating for a few years and not really, just existing for those few years instead of actually living. I was like, I can't keep fucking doing that. Like I'm in my mid to late 30s now. I don't want that to be my life, and I refuse. And this has always been the turning point for me, is like I've always had this overarching beliefs of I refuse to believe that this is how it always has to be, and that always leads to me finding a way out. So I'm grateful to myself that no matter how many hardships and things like that I've gone through, I've always had that, like, I know there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And as long as I know that, I will come to that light. But there are things that you can do as opposed to just existing till the light shows up that that makes it, gets you to a point where it shortens the tunnel. When I got really low, I reached out for help. That help suggested that I take something to help with the state that I was in at that time, which I'm not against. I'm not against modern medicine or anything like that. But I think that oftentimes there are things that we can do like naturally that don't cost anything, that can stop us from needing that intervention. And I was just like, okay, I was in the headspace of, I'm going off on a tangent here, but I honor it because it might resonate with someone, and I trust that it's coming up because it will. I was at a point where I was like, okay, I accept that I don't want to be in this state anymore and that I need to do something about it. But I refuse to believe that that's the only way for me to get to that point. And I want to explore some other avenues first. And I looked into, initially I looked into, I looked up natural alternatives to the thing that was suggested to me, expecting that supplements would come up. And actually all these other things came up. And one of those things was nervous system regulation, one in particular, which is the Wim Hof breathing that I share with a lot of people to do. It's a free video on YouTube. Wim Hof beginner's guided breathing on YouTube. There's one with a woman's voice and there's one with Wim Hof's voice. It was like it switched off the anxiety and the lowness that I was feeling, because the anxiety really only came up at that point when I was reaching out for help and talking and processing these things. The anxiety came up as I was like reliving the event. And then when I went home, I would crash and I would be in that isolation mode, not wanting to interact with people kind of thing. So for me, in my experience, like this is not medical advice, but for me, the nervous system thing, I had been doing box breathing for a while. I had been doing physiological sighs for a while here and there, like as I needed them, but they weren't enough to really reset my nervous system. And the Wim Hof for me, in terms of what I have personally tried, has been the gold standard. And I did that for every morning, no excuses, every morning for a week and a half. And then it was like most mornings from then on for a few more weeks. But after the first time I did it, I initially like immediately felt a positive change. I do want to say, if you do Wim Hof, there are people who I've seen doing it who are like way overdoing the inhales and exhales. That can do more damage than good. So if you think about a balloon, you don't want to overfill a balloon because it'll pop. And when you let the air out of a balloon naturally, there's always some air left in it, right? It's never completely flat, empty. So think of your lungs that way. You're not trying to like fill them to the point of popping, and you're not trying to push as much air out of them as possible. Wim Hof does have a video as well on his YouTube that shows you how to do it properly and explains like not to overdo it. So there's that. Nervous system regulation really just got me to a point where I was able to notice the anxiety more, made me feel okay with stepping away from things that I had been forcing myself through the anxiety to go to and be a part of, because I didn't recognize that I was in an anxious state because I was there for so long. It had gradually happened over a long period of time, and then I was in it constantly, and it was affecting every area of my life, not just my manifestations. So those two things were like huge game changers for me in terms of expanding on the things that I intuitively already knew that I had put in like my guide, my freebie ebook, and, talked about in terms of like feelings are part of the process. They're just not the seed. And it's okay for me to talk about feelings and like go with the affirmations that feel better. Yes, but also do the things that feel better. And when you have a calm nervous system, you will recognize the difference between what feels bad to be around just because it reminded you of it, like, or reminded your body, the stored memories in your body that are stored as feelings of something that happened in the past that is not relevant now, to stop you from, going from fear, self-sabotaging in that moment from fear, like either saying or doing something that's from a place of fear, or not doing anything that's kind of affected your manifestation, but then thinking that you have and ruminating on that and spiraling and then kind of setting yourself back in that way. You're able to recognize things a little bit more easily when you're coming from a cool, calm, like a baseline, cool, calm, collected baseline nervous system and living your life. Yeah. Obviously, I talked about self-concept because I was watching these law of assumption teachers that were on the bandwagon of self-concept, but they didn't even understand what self-concept was. And it wasn't until I kind of just started doing things for me and not concerning myself with whether or not something would hurt someone else's feelings, even if it felt uncomfortable for me to say no to something or whatever it might have been. I haven't prepared any examples, and just focusing more on like, it has to feel good for me. And if it doesn't feel good for me, I'm not going to do it. And I can trust what will feel good. We will be able to differentiate between excitement and anxiety when my nervous system is calm. I will be able to know whether or not I was going to something before because I thought it would lead to my manifestation on a subconscious level. I was doing it to try and force my manifestation, or whether I really want to go. Oftentimes when I would think of those same circumstances, or an opportunity to be in the same, go to a repeat event or something after I started doing things that felt good to me and doing that from a calm nervous system, those things didn't appeal to me as much anymore. when I started doing all of these things, my the movement that had been stagnant for so long started back up. And so the point of me saying all of that is self-concept is not just a bunch of I am affirmations. It is also giving yourself what you want, treating yourself how you want to be treated. And if going somewhere where you know that you were repeatedly disrespected by someone, even if you created that circumstance in the first instance by allowing it because of your shitty self-concept in the first place, you are showing yourself that you don't respect yourself enough to not be in a situation where you know you're going to be treated that way, even if that can be changed. And often in those situations, I did this. I was disrespected by someone. There were times in this social situation, this social team that I was on, I was focusing on changing how they were instead of just going like, I can do other things that I like that are not here, where I'm confronted with this old story showing up in my face. The longer I left it, the harder it was to rewrite that story about that person. And then it just got to the point where I was like, I don't even care to change my thoughts about that person. I would rather just not be there, not be around them. Right? Can I change it? Yeah, I can. I don't care to anymore. It's literally wasted energy when it doesn't affect whether or not I can have my manifestation. And I proved that to myself by respecting myself enough to step away from that. And the things that I thought were logically a link to my manifestation by going there started flowing when I wasn't there, right? I know a lot of you are doing this. So treating yourself how you want to be treated, that can show up in a lot of different ways. Like I said, sometimes it can be not going somewhere where you feel disrespected. That is showing your self-respect. It can be actually having the conversation with someone if you can do it from the right place, which I'll touch on in a moment because it's one of the next things I'm going to talk about. And showing yourself love. Like look, I'm not saying that you have to dress up, put makeup on. Sometimes I'm like, I just want to feel put together today, and I want to put an outfit together and actually color coordinate and not just look like a teenage boy. I always joked that I was a combination between a 60-year-old woman and a 16-year-old teenage boy. Sometimes it just feels good to be put together. In removing myself from that situation, I was also prioritizing myself over my manifestation, because I was really, as much as I genuinely love playing touch, but I was prioritizing myself because I was there. I think I stayed for a long time on a subconscious level because I was like, if I'm not here, then it was weird because consciously I knew, and this is how a lot of people get in their own way, and you get to this place faster with an outsider's perspective who is coming from the understanding of the law of assumption, which is why a coach comes in so handy. On a conscious level, I knew manifestation isn't logical. Don't just go to things that don't feel good to be at because they seem like the logical link to your manifestation. But I was doing that subconsciously. I think I felt tied to it because I thought I wouldn't get what I wanted if I wasn't there, as it being the logical link to my manifestation. Manifestation isn't logical. So when I got to the point where I was like, honestly, my mental and physical health is not worth having that thing if that's what it costs me. So I need to prioritize myself. Then I am going to step away. And then that's when movement in the direction of that particular manifestation that I was subconsciously scared of not being able to have started happening. I just started showing myself a lot of love, care, respect, prioritization. And I did that again from learning the hard way, which is why I teach you guys, do it preemptively so you don't get to that point, because it was fucking awful. And my self-esteem was in the fucking porcelain pee hole. Okay. And then what does that do? Especially for those of you who are manifesting love or even jobs, even having a business. Do you know how hard it was for me to keep putting videos out when I was so self-conscious of my skin? If you go back to my earlier videos, I had packed on the makeup, not even nicely. It was I didn't even, put any dimension in my face or anything like that. I just literally put heaps of foundation on to cover the spots because I really felt so self-conscious, but I didn't care enough about how I looked because of how shitty I felt. But I didn't even put effort into actually doing a makeup look, which I'm not really. I do very basic makeup because I don't really know how to do makeup. But if you look, I packed on the makeup and then I put on 3 filters just to feel okay enough to post videos that would help me grow my business. So Self-concept is not just I am affirmations. It is also how you treat yourself, is how other people treat you. And I saw that respect in people when I respected myself. When I stepped away, people started having my back then. I stayed thinking as well, like, and this was conscious thoughts, I'm going to stay and I'm not going to address the situation and show myself respect because I'm just going to trust, which ended up over a long period of time was probably me honestly radiating desperation for people to see that I wasn't this person that I was being made out to be by other people. And that was just creating all this additional anxiety that I was then putting a lot of time and energy into to try and convince people otherwise and undo up here when I could have just removed myself from what was triggering it and further perpetuating it and showing myself love, respect, care, prioritization. And then things fucking started going in that direction. And the other thing is really nervous system regulation, going back to that in a way, but it ties in, like, being angry with yourself about it is, again, just adding extra work. The tendency to put yourself through those things came from listening to bad information from people who are just parroting what other people are saying. Your previous experiences that have wired and programmed your mind to not put yourself first. And none of those things are your fault. But the positive thing is you now know that it's safe. I'm telling you from my own experience, it's safe to do these things for yourself. It's safe to step away from the thing that seems like the logical link to your manifestation. And you don't have to feel bad about the time that's passed, because all the work that you're doing now from these realizations is actually going to mean that when it comes in, it's going to be sustainable. It's not just going to come in because you've willed it to with only focusing on your thoughts. You're actually going to, by the time it comes in, be the version of you that, of course, would have it. And therefore, you wouldn't be doing anything to self-sabotage because you don't feel like you need to prove or manipulate or any of those things that we do to self-sabotage from subconscious programming, because you've already reprogrammed all of that before it even comes in. So you're ready for it. Abraham Hicks calls this getting ready to be ready. So that's a really in-depth look at my cheat codes. Those are the honest examples in my life that led me to those things that I intuitively knew but ignored because of what I was being taught, which is why I decided I can absolutely be a law of assumption teacher and integrate these things that other people are telling you not to worry about. The other main thing, which I kind of touched on, is boundaries. It's a lot of law of assumption coaches specifically out there teaching you that you don't have to set boundaries. Do you have to? No. Do boundaries mean actually having a conversation with someone? Not necessarily. Boundaries are okay as long as they're not coming from a place of fear and manipulation and an out of whack nervous system. And like I said, they don't have to be a conversation. They could be like what I did, where I was just like, my boundary with myself is I'm not going to be around people that don't feel good to be around anymore. I'm not going to say yes to things that don't feel good to say yes to. If I'm tired, I'm going to let myself rest instead of feeling guilty for resting and fearful of the fact that if I say no, that I'm going to lose people. Because all of that does is really means, like, ways that can show up as self-sabotaging is like going to something out of fear that you're going to lose them if you say no, but then you're tired and then you're irritable and then your nervous system's out of whack because you haven't had enough rest, and you end up saying or doing something from a triggered place that you maybe wouldn't have been triggered by had you been rested, had you had a calmer nervous system. Okay, so I won't waffle on too much about boundaries, but the main thing is that you check in with yourself when you want to set a boundary, whether it is a conversation or not. And the thing is, if you don't use boundaries as an excuse to just not do the work on yourself and try to force someone else to be a way you want them to be, right? That's the main thing. Am I wanting to set this boundary from a place of anxiety? Am I trying to set this boundary in hopes that the result will be this? You can't be attached to the result. And you need to know that when you set a boundary, especially, I mean, it can happen either way, that it seems to backfire initially. But particularly when you're going into a conversation with someone, you need to know that if you're going to set that boundary and they happen to react in a way that seems like the opposite of what you would want, you need to be able to trust that that's not opposing your manifestation. if you're scared of that kind of reaction happening from setting the boundary, don't set the boundary yet. Focus on doing your nervous system regulation work and things that you enjoy, feel good things, and working on yourself and treating yourself how you want to be treated. Boundaries kind of comes naturally when you do the cheat codes. The cheat codes just kind of lead to you doing things naturally that are in line with your manifestation. And that's what I learned from like doing them, from learning the hard way first. It wasn't until I did them for me that I realized, oh, they're actually benefiting my manifestations in all these ways. So that's the video for this week. If you're interested in any content on like physical health stuff, rashes, acne, things like that, let me know. If you need help with self-concept outside of the free content that I share on it, I am in the process of creating a solid self-concept course that you can sign up to the waitlist for down below. It's a no obligation to buy waitlist, and only people on the waitlist will get a 50% off code when it's released. I'm aiming for the end of January, potentially February. But I've been using my Christmas break away from my part-time job to really chip away at it. So that's not far off. As always, it would be really appreciated if you would like to like, share, comment, and subscribe to help my channel grow so I can continue to help as many people as possible on a free platform. That would be amazing. It's your interacting with my videos that helps that happen. So I appreciate those of you who do already, and in advance for those of you who are going to. As always, thank you for being here. You're fucking legends. Don't you ever forget it. And until next time, have a good one. That's not far off. Just spat.